So hey everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder review video. In this video we're going to be looking at the Aztron Nova range of boards. These are the small, very foldable, compact range of boards that go into a small backpack. Very easy to transport. Last year they had one board in the Nova range and that was the 10-foot board. This year they have two more boards to the Nova range. In this video we're going to help you understand if one of these boards is right for you and the pros and cons to buying into an Aztron board. So first off, a bit about Aztron. Aztron have been making paddle boards for a few years now. They definitely were a new kid on the block 2 years ago, but now they are really becoming a very well-established brand, and a lot of you are getting on the water and using Aztron equipment, whether it is with a hard composite board or an inflatable paddle board. And this year in 2021, there is a lot more stuff to the Aztron range. There is a foiling range of stuff. There is lots of accessories. There's safety equipment. There's surfboards. There's wetsuits. There's dry suits. There's so much more stuff that Aztron are bringing out. The three boards that we're looking at got a small 9-foot by 28 inches, and that's 4.7 inches thick, generally designed for junior or lighter paddlers. Then you have the 10-foot by 32, which is the same size as we had last year. That's a 6-inch thick board. And now you've also got the 11-foot by 32, and that's also a 6-inch thick board. So the 9-foot and the 11-foot are the new boards for this year. Looking at the weights of these boards, the 9-foot board weighs 7.3 kilograms, the 10-foot board weighs 9 kilograms, and the 11-foot weighs 9.3 kilograms. The construction of these boards all the same construction. You've got an internal core of drop stitch, you have a PVC layer around the outside of that drop stitch, and then you have multiple layers of PVC along the rails, which give you a much more hard wearing rail. And these boards actually come with a double chamber. If you're unaware what a double chamber is, a double chamber is where they have an internal chamber that you pump up first inside the middle of the board, and then you have to pump up the outer sort of shell of the board. The double chamber is something that Aztron have always made with all of their inflatable paddle boards. It does a number of things. It can add a safety element that if you deflate or pop the outside chamber, you have an internal chamber which stays inflated. But really for us, the biggest thing we see and the standout thing is the extra stiffness you will get by having a double chamber. Having two chambers of air and extra materials and reinforcing that they've stuck it together does give the board a lot more stiffness, and especially when you're standing in this standing area, it is directly where you want that stiffness, right underneath your feet. So now let's talk about transporting the boards, getting them to the water, pumping them up, getting them on the water, and what are they like to paddle. So first off, they do come with a pretty small bag, and it is pretty much half the size of a standard sort of SUP bag. Therefore, it's going to be really easy to transport in your car. Maybe you're on a motorbike, cycling. It's compact, it's not too big. The bag itself is a fairly lightweight bag. There's not much padding going on around the back or the shoulder straps, and that's something you would expect to see of the price point of these boards. So when you're wearing the bag, it's really key that you get the board in a good position to make sure your bag is the most comfortable when it's on your back. I would say you happily could carry these moderate distances, maybe 10-15 minutes. They are, as I said, they're not the most comfortable on the market, but these aren't the heaviest boards on the market. But if you were traveling a little bit further, you could definitely put a towel down the back, you could put your wetsuit around the board, and no doubt you guys who have already got these boards know very much how to fit the stuff in the bag to get them the most comfortable. When it comes to getting the boards out of the bags and inflating them, they're very quick to inflate. You inflate the internal chamber first, and then you inflate the outer chamber. The pump it comes with is a pump that's very similar to the other Aztron pumps. It's a two-way pump, which means that you put air in it on the upstroke, and you put air in the board on the downstroke, and then when the pumping gets hard and you can't pull your pump up anymore, you can take this red nozzle out the back and you can just pump on the downstroke. Then it's easier to get the air in the board. These pumps are actually a little bit smaller than the other standard Aztron pumps, so they go in the bags a bit easier. These types of pumps are just like other pumps on the market. They are very adequate and quite easy to get 15 psi in these boards. Obviously, the smaller pump and the bigger board, especially the 11-foot, is going to take a little bit longer to get the air in, but it's generally a compromise you are willing to pay for having a smaller, more compact board. So then when you pop your board up, the next thing to do is add your fins. When we reviewed the Nova last year, the 10-foot, we were really impressed with this fin system, and it's the same fin system. It's Aztron sort of push-in, click-back system. It's got a sliding click, very solid, very sturdy. The fins themselves are very stiff, which are going to give you make it a bit easier to paddle in a straight line than paddling with a really flexible fin. And definitely it's a fin that you are going to be able to ram up the beach. Because it's a compact board that goes in half, you have two fins. So you don't have a central fin like other boards do, because this board obviously is rolled in half, and you won't be able to fold it across a fin box. So it comes with a twin fin system. But because these fins are relatively shallow but quite wide, they do make paddling nice and easy. But we'll speak about that in a second. Looking at the paddles you get with the package, you get two different types of paddles. With the 10-foot and the 11-foot, you get a 4-piece aluminium shaft plastic blade paddle, and with the 9-foot board you get a 3-piece glass fiber shaft plastic blade paddle. Now these paddles are really smart, especially the junior paddle. That is a very neat paddle, reduced diameter shaft, so it's nice and easy for their hands. Smaller handle at the top there. It's fairly light because it's glass fiber, but it's still got a plastic blade, so if they do go up the beach and dig sandcastles with it, which will happen, it is a tough, sturdy paddle that is going to last. It comes apart in the middle there with a push pin, nice and easy, and you can adjust the top thing with a full adjuster. Really nice, easy to use. My daughter Izzy loves it actually because it's fairly small, compact, and it does fit her hands absolutely perfectly, and it's easy for her to adjust. The adult, or the bigger paddle, is similar to last year's paddle, but I said it looks much better with the white graphics on it. You can still take the paddle apart. It's 4 sections, this one. Remove the top section, very similar to the junior paddle there. And the bottom section, the actual blade, comes right out the end there, and you've got sort of a clamp system that clamps it all together. So then it's nice and compact, goes in the bag, nice and small. Not a problem to transport with these paddles at all. The only thing you're going to have to do definitely is make sure your screw threads are nice and tight, so when you put the clamp lock on, it does secure the paddle nice and securely with that clamp. Very easy to do. It's something you should all do with all of your inflatable board packages when they first arrive. Generally the screw threads will always need tightening up a little bit so it clamps onto the paddle shaft really securely. With the bigger paddle, similar to the kids paddle, you've still got a hard wearing plastic blade. A bit more shape to this paddle actually for a plastic blade. It's quite nice, quite easy to paddle with, and again, if you want to accidentally hit the rocks with it, it's something that is going to last a bit longer than maybe a glass fiber or a carbon paddle would do. When you first start paddling, it would be great to use, but they're not as hard wearing, and definitely that's why they put plastic blades with the more entry level all-round paddle boards. Before you get in the water, for most cases you definitely want to add your leash. Very easy to put on around the stainless D-ring. The leashes that Aztron have always made, they've always impressed us. They're always quite colour coordinated, they're nice and big. Sort of a mini corded, coiled leash, quite neat. Again, really good for this package, perfectly adequate for general all-round paddling, maybe a bit of light surfing, a nice quality leash. When it comes to carrying your board on the water, because this board is a foldable board, the handle is offset. So you'll find that one side is shorter than the other. Therefore, for me, I've got longer arms. I will have it on the lower setting and I can get it nice and high off the beach. Maybe if I'm walking down steps, it's really easy to carry the board down. Also, for the kids out there, having a handle offset and this little 9-foot, 7-kilo board, it's really easy for the kids to carry because they can either get their hands, as I said, over the board, or they can have it the other way around and have it shorter, have it further up on the board. It's just a nice little thing that does make it easier to carry, and a lot of you out there as well will find that a real benefit. As you're going on the water, if you want to take your flip-flops off or take your dry bag with you or take a drink with you, you've got your bungee straps up at the front there, really easy to access. You slip stuff on, nice and tight, so it's easy to get stuff in. Good position, and also you can get a fair size dry bag on the front there if you wanted to. When you first jump on the board, the first thing you probably notice is the stiffness of the boards for the double chamber that's under your feet. Now the stiffness, remember we do deflection tests with our boards, and we did our deflection test last year on the 10-foot, and it's the same results this year. The deflection test is where we put a board on a gap of 1.5 meters apart, and we put 75 kilograms of weight in the center, and then we measure how much the board bends or deflects. A really stiff board, like a top of the range, very expensive board will be around 8mm in deflection, and a really flexible board, the cheapest on the market, will be around 25, 26 sort of millimeters. These 6-inch boards dropped 19mm, which is a very respectable drop. It's definitely for the weight of the boards, and definitely having the double chamber in there gives them a little bit extra stiffness. For instance, if the double chamber wasn't in these boards, they would probably be something around sort of 22, maybe 21mm. So the double chamber does give the board a lot more stiffness. Why is stiffness important when it comes to paddleboarding? Well, just imagine every time you put your paddle stroke in, every time you try to move yourself around the board, it's going to cause the board to deflect or bend, which means for every paddle stroke you put in, you're not going to be moving as far as you would do with a board that doesn't bend, because the energy is going into the bending of the board, not pushing you forward. And that's really why it's really important, and it's good to get a stiffer base board, especially if you're a heavier rider. With lighter riders and with kids and stuff, having a board that bends a little bit more compared to putting a heavy person on it doesn't really affect it so much, because they're a lighter person on that board, which is why, again, that 9-foot board is 4.75 inches thick, and these other two boards are 6 inches thick. Having a thicker board will give you a bit more stiffness as well, so it's another thing to bear in mind, which is why you wouldn't put a 95 kilo person on the smaller 9-foot, but a 95 kilo person could easily stand on the 11 or 10 foot. When it comes to putting your first few paddle strokes in, definitely having the twin fins gives you that straight line tracking. If you had one single fin in the middle, it would have to be a bigger fin to give you that same equivalent straight line tracking, which is why the two fins are the size they are. Now, when it comes to paddling around generally with these boards, you're going to find them quite comfortable to use. The two 10-foot and the 11-foot are 32 inches wide, which is the sort of golden width for most people up to about 95 kilograms. To have a good stable board. If you're heavier than that, maybe you should be looking at a 33, 34 inch wide board. And if you're lighter than that, let's say you're sub 50, 60 kilograms, maybe you should be looking at a 28 wide board, because the extra width will slow you down a little bit, and if you don't need that extra stability, it might be something you can look towards a narrower board. But for most people, these sizes of boards are definitely the boards to get into paddling with. The 11-foot will give you a bit more glide because it's a longer base board. If you go longer overall, you'll have more waterline length, and it will travel further, faster, for less effort on the water. So the 10-foot could be a board that's a bit more maneuverable. You'll definitely find that when you use the 10-foot, it's easier to turn and move around. Doing your crossbow turns or your step back turns, it turns a little bit quicker, but it's not as fast to paddle as the 11-foot. The 11-foot's got that more glide. You still can do surfing and turning around and mucking around with both of these boards, but the 11-foot will give you that little bit more glide compared to the 10-foot. The 9-foot is the same characteristics, but it's set up for the lighter paddlers, for the junior paddlers. So something around 9 foot long, 28 wide is a good width of board for a lot of kids to get into SUP. Generally, something between 8 foot to 9 foot long, around 28 inches wide is the optimum width. Just like these ones are the optimum width for the average sort of adult paddler. Because the kids board isn't so thick, it's not going to sit so high out of the water, therefore they're going to find it a little bit easier to paddle. If you're a little bit lower on the water, you can just feel a bit more attached to the paddling experience. Definitely the junior kids paddlers out there do enjoy using this type of board. Izzy, my daughter, really enjoyed using this type of board. Very comfortable, very easy, quite lightweight. Again, extra stiffness in the middle there. They do notice it. They might not be able to tell you it, but they will notice that extra stiffness, even if they're a first-time junior paddler. While you're paddling around on your board, you'll definitely notice the fixtures and fittings that are finished off the board. Obviously, you've got your bungees, as I said, on the top here. You've got your inflation valves in the middle. You've got a nice comfortable carry handle, neoprene backed Aztron branded up carry handle. The EVA deck pad that's split in half, so obviously you've got to fold the board in the middle, so they've taken this deck pad out of the middle section here. It's adequate for 90% of your standing time, just cruising around. It goes all the way towards the back, so if you do want to do your step back turns or start just jumping around, mucking about, trying to get off balance with the board, walking up and down, you have got a lot of deck pad here. But obviously bear in mind, you haven't got any in the middle, but that doesn't really make a difference when you're just doing general paddling. Other stuff that's worth noting is the leashing plug. It's off at the back to one side because you can fold the board up. The leashing plug itself's got a nice solid stainless D-ring, and the actual D-ring is put through a stainless tube and the leash is then attached to the board through that. So it's a very solid system with the stainless tube and the D-ring through that. Looks quite nice, and it's definitely something you don't always see on the other cheaper price point boards out there. Your stainless D-rings up at the top here are all nicely fitted, and they also look good quality. And the board graphics in general, I think, look pretty good this year. Aztron have always had quite funky board graphics, and obviously it's always a personal thing, but for the price, again, the boards do look pretty cool. So you've come off the board from this session and you're packing your board up. How easy is it to pack up, deflate, pack it away in the bag? So when you let the air out of these boards, the air comes out pretty quick, but you are going to have to put your pump on the deflate setting to get that last bit of air out of the internal chamber and the external chamber. It's very easy to do. You just take your pump hose off the standard, turn it around and screw it back on the other end, and you suck the air out of the board. You can unclip your fins nice and easy. You fold your board in half, then you roll it up around the pump from the nose and you roll the board all the way up. I generally find that when you're taking the air out of these boards, they roll up pretty easy, and they do go in the bag very easy with the compression strap. You can click around the board as well. Getting them comfortable in the bag, as I said, is always a bit more of a challenge because you're putting a round board on your back, which is basically square. So getting in the bag's not a problem, but getting it comfortable, if you're carrying it longer distances, more than 10 minutes, definitely I would put your wetsuit or your towel down the back to give you a bit more comfort. The 3-piece paddle breaks down and goes in the side of the bag nice and easy, and you can get your pump in it, so everything can go in the bag nice and easily. Giving you a quick summary of the 3 boards with ability, weight range, and what you're going to be using them for. Looking at the junior board, definitely I think you could start them off with young kids on there, but probably they're going to be around sort of 5, 6 up to about maybe 13, 14, depends how big they are obviously, but weight wise it's going to be able to take up to 65, 70 kilograms comfortably with the 9-foot Neo Nova. The Nova 10-foot is a great all-round size board. It's for all types of paddling, as all these boards are. Weight-wise for that, 65, 60 kilograms for the lower weights, up to about 85, 90 kilograms for the higher weights. The real sweet spot is going to be 75, 80 kilograms definitely, and it's for all types of paddling. You could probably get into a bit more surf with that because it's a little bit shorter than the 11-foot. The 11-foot is going to be the faster board that's going to have more glide. Because it's got a bit more length, it will be easier for heavier paddler to paddle and get a bit more speed out of it as well. The real sweet spot for the weight of the Supernova will probably be between 85 to 95 kilograms, and it would probably take people up to 110 kilograms, but obviously bear in mind, if you're a little bit heavier, you might want something a little bit wider, or if you're paddling in flat water lakes, flat water conditions all the time, this board might be absolutely fine. Paddling in sea and choppy waters, definitely you might want to be looking towards a wider base board. You're going to be able to do all types of paddling with all of these boards. You're going to be able to catch some waves, you're going to be able to do a bit of light family fun, mucking about, putting somebody on the front maybe of the longer one, taking the dog out with you, bit of light touring. It's going to be a board to get you into paddleboarding, to do a lot of different types of disciplines. And also some of you eagle-eyed paddlers out there might have also spotted that the Neo Nova could actually be a good surf SUP as well, and I think it could because it is 4.75 inches thick. It's got 2 fins out on the side there. If you're more experienced, maybe of the 70 kilograms, that board might actually be quite a neat little iSUP surfboard as well. So now let's talk a bit about the environmental credentials that Aztron are doing, what comes in the board. We'll also talk about pros and cons, value for money, and give you a short summary of the Aztron at the end. So the environmental message that Aztron are doing, what is the packaging like? Well, unfortunately, this is still where Aztron come a bit unstuck for us. The packaging is still wrapped in plastic. You still get a fair amount of plastic with the actual board, and it's obviously harder to recycle or biodegrade than paper or cardboard, which a lot of other brands are doing. We have spoke to them about this and they said they are definitely wanting to change that, so we look out and we hope that happens in the next year, but unfortunately they're not as good as some other brands when it comes to the environmental recyclable nature of the packaging that comes with these boards. Aztron offer a warranty with all their boards, and all these boards are sold to shops, so you can actually go back to a shop to deal with any potential problems you have with these boards. And definitely looking at the growth of Aztron over the last 2 years, they have really grown so much more to their range. Their catalogue is getting thicker and thicker every year, and they're obviously putting a lot of work into paddleboarding and lifestyle water sports, and they definitely are trying to make the better products for you all out there to enjoy water sports as much as possible. Looking at pros and cons and value for money, well, the pros to the Aztron stuff is actually, for the value, going to bring that in there. These boards are very competitive prices, and and they're available in shops. The Neo Nova, starting at £299 as a complete package, is a cheap price point board to get your kids on the water. Looking at the Nova, £349, that is a cheap price point, and the bigger Supernova, £399. These are cheap price point boards, but really for that you do get a fairly good quality package. And what I really like is the actual style of fittings that Aztron actually put on their boards. I mean, like all of their valves are Aztron logoed up. Like I said, you have a stainless tube inside the D-ring that attaches your board for your leashing point at the back there. A nice branded up pump, the paddles all branded up, logoed nicely. So the packages do look quite smart, and you do look like you get quite a lot with the sort of fittings on these boards as well. It's a really good move. Aztron have upped the bigger range this year. Definitely bringing in the junior Neo board is a good move, and also having the 11-foot Supernova is going to give those more paddlers that more ability to get on the water and get them on this smaller, more transportable range. We got a lot of questions last year off the Nova review asking about what size maybe it wasn't big enough, and I think now the Supernova will answer that for a lot of you out there. And talking about cons, well, the big thing I want to draw out is you've got to remember that when you're buying a cheaper price point product, there's always going to be a compromise. There's always going to be a compromise from spending 4 times the amount of money on a board. And the compromise really is still to do with the overall finish of the boards. I mean, these boards are finished absolutely adequately, and you're going to be able to paddle them absolutely fine, and they're not going to make a difference to when you're actually paddling. But definitely the finish isn't as high as some other top-end brands, like the glue marks are a little bit more seen. You can see slight fold marks where the boards get folded in half. This is stuff that is acceptable and to be expected, especially for that price point. If you want to have a board that's finished off to a really high level, you are going to have to pay more money for it. And another thing that's definitely a con is you are going to have to definitely get your board in the bag correctly. Put a towel around it, because it can be a little bit more uncomfortable because there's no padding around that back area. But again, it is the compromise you pay for that cheaper price point board. If you don't mind putting your towel in to make your board comfortable, then it's absolutely not a con, it's just something you need to be aware of. In summary, these 3 boards from Aztron, the Neo Nova, the Nova and the Supernova, are going to get you on the water doing all types of paddling, and they're going to get you to be able to keep your board maybe in the back of your car all of the time because it is much smaller than the other average SUPs on the market. I think for a lot of you out there, the Supernova is going to be the one because it's got a little bit more length. A lot of you are looking to paddle a little bit further, and this will be the standout board, I think, for us for this year. And the other thing is the new Kids Neo board is going to be a real winner, especially at that price point. So many kids are going to get into paddleboarding, which I really think is only a good thing. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. If you've got these boards, if you've used these boards, give us your comments, give us your feedback as always. And please, if you haven't been on SUPboarder yet, check out SUPboarder Mag. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this video a like if you found it useful. Give this video a dislike if you found it complete rubbish. But please write in the comment section below why it's rubbish and how we can improve it for the future. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on another video real soon.